under a grant contract with the Tennessee Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services.
Don't take your hearing for granted. Hearing loss.
Yes, don't take for granted your hearing. And this is Tri-Cities Sports Now. Remember when we had Bugs Bunny Saw Florida on the show? That's me. The Roadrunners Show. Remember that? All right, it's Marky Billson, Tri-City Sports Now. I am the poor little Roadrunner because I never bother anyone. In today's show, SoCon John Hooper comes on at 1:30. We're going to talk about all things Southern Conference, and there's still a lot to talk about. Primarily basketball transfers. I mean, there is ETSU dropping 3 games to UNCG. And what looked to be a season-ending series against Samford in the middle of the season that was going to be for all of it, now looks like a team that, although they have a good one-loss record, may be limping home towards the Southern Conference tournament. But regardless, SoCon John Hooper, he's the man in the know in the Southern Conference, and he's going to join me at 1:30, and we're going to talk about people transferring up and all this. Usually we have SoCon John Hooper's counterpart at 1. Counterpart, that's not the word I'm looking for. Usually 1 p.m. on Monday we have Jerry Bonkowski at 1 to talk about yesterday's NASCAR race. And then we have on SoCon John Hooper at 1:30 to talk about all things SoCon. However, they're running the race now. So we can't do that. So I'm going to call up Jerry here and find out what he wants to do, but I think that tomorrow is probably 1 p.m. what we're going to do to talk about the race at Dover, which is just underway as we speak, live from Dover. And I'll give you updates on it heading forward. Boy, rainy weekend. We had all those delays to the baseball. You know, you get it. I don't like talking about the weather. You know, I really don't. You know, because to me the weather is like, I hear it was nice and sunny when they bomb Pearl Harbor. Who cares? Really? I mean, you may meet the love of your life in a tornado. Anyway. But the transfers I spoke of with the Southern Conference, the news came out yesterday, I guess it was, or over the weekend, that Mladen Armus was going to be transferring from ETSU, starting center, and a good one, to Boise State. He'll have to sit out a year. I was a little surprised. I was thinking, Boise State, boy, people know them for football. They don't know them for basketball. And then I started doing a little bit of research. Now, I wanted to begin this because I think that says a lot about perception. The perception of, let's say, ETSU basketball against Boise State, the perception of the Southern Conference against the WAC, Western Athletic Conference. A lot of perceptions. And a lot of times those perceptions don't come out very well for ETSU. I'll give you an example. Remember last year before the ETSU UT football game, and I famously said, Logan Marchie is better than Jared Guarantano. And the reaction was, you got to be nuts. And I pointed out that to this day, Logan Marchie, who's graduated, who lost his job as the starter at ETSU, threw for more 200-yard games at Temple against the likes of Notre Dame than Jared Guarantano has in pretty much 2 years as a starter at UT, playing against the likes of, in addition to, yes, Alabama and Georgia and all this, Vanderbilt, Kentucky, ETSU. Teams like that. You know, the second to South Carolina. I mean, you know. These are teams that aren't as good as Notre Dame. Let's face it. But the thing that I would get is, well, if Marchie's so good, why is he at ETSU? Perception. Think about this now. We got at least 3 starting quarterbacks in the NFL that I can name off the top of my head who went to FCS schools. I am speaking, of Carson Wentz, Philadelphia Eagles, got a Super Bowl ring. Joe Flacco, Denver Broncos, has a Super Bowl ring with the Ravens. And Ryan Fitzpatrick, who, yes, the Miami Dolphins turned to and said, maybe Josh Rosen is our quarterback of the future, but at least on opening day, you're going to be our starter, and we think you'll be a good mentor. After all, you went to Harvard. So the perception is this, and it's too simplistic. FBS good, FCS bad. ETSU is subservient to Tennessee, and with that, the Tri-Cities subservient to Knoxville. A short-sighted opinion, to say the least. Well, it's one that's out there. I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm just saying what's out there, and you know it's true. So how does this relate to Mladen Armus going to Boise State? Because, yeah, it is a little surprising to some people until they look at it a little bit deeper. I mean, the SoCon was ranked as a superior basketball conference to the WAC last year. NET ratings had the SoCon 15. The WAC was 16. RPI ratings, which are now old-fashioned, had the divide a little bit greater, but you get the idea. And like I said, it was the thought of, hey, Armus is going from basketball school to football school. But for those critical of Armus, I want you to think about something. Remember 2 years ago, Steve Forbes interviewed New Mexico. They're on a WAC. Nobody says, why were you doing that? Why were you going to a lesser conference? Why were you going to a lesser program? UT fans, I have no idea why UT fans are upset that Rick Barnes is making more money. I mean, why don't you want him to have more money? I don't understand that. But you've got this thing of Rick Barnes used UT with UCLA to get more money. Okay. How are the employee? Yeah. Don't you want a raise? I mean, come on. Think about this. And yes, if one other entity wanted to hire you at a higher wage than where you're working at now, don't you go to your employer and say, look, I mean, things are good here, but I've been given this offer. Can you match it? Can you exceed it? Well, Burns did. I can't understand why people are upset with that. I can't understand it in the least. Anyway, for those critical of Armus, like I said, think about what Steve Forbes did. He interviewed at New Mexico. What is the difference? Armus goes to Boise State. That's in the WAC. Forbes, if they'll hire me, New Mexico will be better than ETSU. What's the difference? I also think Armus will get more than 24 minutes a game, which is roughly what he got, just a little bit less, but 24 minutes a game last year at ETSU. Remember, it's a crowded lineup of centers at ETSU with Gasson and Corley, and they're both 7 foot. And Armus has got to sit out a year, but come 2021, the Broncos don't have any big men returning that have actually played in the game. They have a 6'10 forward, but he didn't play last year. Other than that, no big men. So Armus is probably going to be a go-to center, one that may be able to get 30 minutes a game at Boise State. But I do think there is a disturbing double standard, be it at ETSU, the Tri-Cities, East Tennessee, or maybe even college basketball at large. Hey, what's good for the coach, Steve Forbes interviewing at New Mexico, is good for the player. Armus transferring to Boise State. There are a lot of sour grapes, and you don't have those sour grapes, for instance, say concerning, I don't know, ETSU, losing, who was the player they lost to at Louisiana Monroe? DeAndre Bernard. DeAndre Bernard lost in Louisiana Monroe, Sun Belt Conference, okay? You don't hear anybody really complaining about that. The reason why? Bernard wasn't going to play at ETSU. Armus was. That's why people around here have sour grapes. It's as plain as that. I mean, But Boise State was 13-20 last year. Leon Rice, he's their head coach, used to be an assistant at Gonzaga. Before they were 13-20 last year, they won 20 games for 6 straight years. And during that time, by the way, they made the NCAAs twice with an at-large berth. Armus is also going to join Emmanuel Acott. You know who Emmanuel Acott is? He's transferring from Arizona, all that mess down there, Sean Miller and the Wildcats. He was a 5-star recruit. Right up to say, biggest name basketball player ever to come to Boise State. So they're going to be a pretty tough team up there in Idaho in 2020-21. But let's consider the perception of Boise State and ETSU, because Boise State decided to leave the FBS, or it was called then Division I AA, in 1997. And they've enjoyed the fruits of their labor by becoming a nationally ranked football program that has trickled down to where they can make the NCAA tournament without having to win their conference tournament. Now, what if ETSU were to attempt a similar climb? One school I think that they could kind of look to, how would it go, is Appalachian State. That would be a model. They've had more football success. I know that maybe it's more fun to be in the FCS playoffs than in a minor bowl game. Or not. That is debatable. But that is the argument for staying in the FCS. Well, the playoffs are more fun than the Poinsettia Bowl or whatever it's called, the Camellia Bowl or whatever they go to. But Appalachian State has brought in North Carolina, will bring in North Carolina and South Carolina. They've already brought in Miami to play. They've got more attention taking Tennessee and Penn State to overtime than they ever would by winning the FCS National Championship. Their football lot has increased. They were ranked in the top 25 last year. If ETSU tried to make a similar climb, well, you'd have to concern yourself with basketball because the SoCon is, at least for now, the Superior Hoops Conference, and ETSU got Patrick Good to transfer from the Mountaineers to the Buccaneers. The same, though, could incidentally be said of Armus's departure to Boise State that was said about Bernard transferring to Louisiana Monroe. More playing time. That's why who becomes the next Southern Conference commissioner is so important. Right now, there are 26 men's basketball players from the conference who have announced intentions to transfer or explore professional waters. Now, it's one thing for Kevin Easley of Chattanooga and BMI's Bubba Parham to transfer to TCU and Georgia Tech, respectively. But what about going to the WAC, the Sun Belt, the Horizon? Furman's Jalen Williams. He's going to transfer to Cleveland State. Armus's departure is a loss for ETSU. Again, that's why there's so much sour grapes around it. But with 7-footers Lucas Gasson, Octave, and Corley coming back, Bucks should still be in good shape. Because that's the equivalent of Foles replacing Wentz. Bigger picture is what the conference can do to prevent such departures in order to grow, rather than become a breeding ground to other teams. And that's what the next commissioner has got to look at, along with a lot of other things. I'm Marky Billson. Yeah, what about that Kentucky Derby? Talk about it after this.